I think in starting the conversation about making amends for body, specifically like the mind body connection, I was just thinking about how, at least in early recovery, and when I say early recovery, I'm thinking like the first year, first year or two. I think that stuff, that connection between like the mind and the body still feels a little, well, for me, it felt kind of a little disconnected. I think one of the hard things during that time is making, well, you know what? A big part of it is like not knowing what's happening. Excuse me. So there's like a lack of awareness around like the way my mind is impacting my body. So either anxiety, well, the thing that comes to like the forefront of my mind is, for example, like the way I use sex. So like sex was a high, but I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. Like I didn't realize I was using sex to like disconnect from my feelings. I didn't realize like I was using sex alcoholically. Like I thought, like I just didn't think anything of it.
Absolutely.
You know, until it started to spiral. And so I feel like that was certainly present in at least the first 2 years, where I'm just like trying to figure out this connection between my mind and my body. I mean, it's like something you said, I think you said this last year, maybe it was even earlier this year, where you were talking about, I don't know if this was actually something public, so I'm not going to share, but basically it was about the way you treat your home. Do you remember this?
Just say it.
Oh, well,
because it's like, for me, you'll know. It's like, if I talk to you about it, if I don't start with the caveat, like, please don't tell anybody.
Yeah. Well,
it's something I've worked through.
Remember when you were talking about how during COVID, you tried bringing the bathhouse to your place.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. Huh?
And then like, I think you had invited someone over or something like that. And you didn't like that. Like, it felt like it was kind of like,
and I didn't know, I didn't know that I was bringing that.
Right.
But it ended up. Yeah.
Like that subtle. Yeah. So I feel like that subtleness, like that subtle in the way that, like not realizing like the subtle things that actually impact my body and the way like I think about myself. It's taken me a while.
Absolutely.
It's taken
I think it's like Bell Hooks talks about this idea of decolonizing our mind. Well, I really feel like I always say like, okay, so the old fashioned operators where while I was using and drinking, they were it was some inexperienced person connecting all the wires, but the wires were screwed up. So when I came in, like my emotions were all over the place. Like when I was sad, I didn't express it that way. When I was happy, all of it was just a big jumble. And I think that first year, especially because I think once you stop taking the drugs and the alcohol or whatever, and once you start sitting still, or maybe, that's when the real kind of like work can start, like as far as healing. And so I think that first year, especially with that, is our minds kind of like getting a rest so that they can begin the healing process.
Yeah. And I think it takes, this is something I learned in therapy, is that, you can intellectually understand something, but and you can do healing like intellectually, but your central nervous system it takes time for the central nervous system to catch up.
Absolutely.
So I think, and I hear this sometimes where people will say, well, I understand this intellectually, or I understand like these ideas, but like, I just don't feel it yet.
Yeah.
And I think that subtle connection is one that it took me a long time to figure out. And I think, the part about making amends to myself is, and this is something that I still struggle with, is that like, so for example, I'm on the 10th step in SLAW. So for folks who aren't familiar with SLAW is Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. And there was something on my 10th step that I was talking to my sponsor about, and I was beating myself up over it. And, you get to the part where it's like, do we owe anyone amends? And I was talking to my sponsor and I was like, no, I didn't like hurt anyone. And my sponsor was like, yeah, but what about yourself? Like you're beating yourself up over this. Like, don't you owe yourself an amends here? And I thought, oh shit, like I didn't think about that either.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. For folks listening, as usual, if you have any thoughts about making amends to your body, we'd love to hear it, or just any thoughts in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's like one of those things, that the mind body connection, and that's actually too, like, that's a pretty, at least my understanding of the mind body connection is that that's something that's developed over the years. Like within the last 20 years, the connection, at least in research, has been like stronger. And that's like something that more people are looking at as something that's worth paying attention to. Anyway.
I think like a really, like I was thinking while you were talking, it's like a really amazing amends that I was able to make early on. And I think it had everything to do with my higher power and my relationship to my higher power. And also that third step about turning it over. When we come in, whatever age we are, we come in as physical adults, maybe not mental adults. And, the challenge that we have is in not giving ourselves grace, because I don't know about you, but judging me and thinking that I'm not going to talk to somebody about what I'm struggling with because I'm embarrassed. I've got shame around the fact that I should know better when in fact, who says I should know better?
Right.
If I didn't learn it, I didn't know better. So the amends on that end was when I finally just said, you know what, I don't know. And a perfect example, I was staying in a co-op, and we had chores around, and one of my chores for the week or whatever was to load the dishwasher, and I would just throw things in there, whatever, all willy nilly. And I had a moment, and I don't know why it was, but in that moment we were having a meeting, and there was a complaint about it. And I just said, you know what, look, I'm sorry. I don't know. I need to relearn how to load the dishwasher. I didn't reach out to anyone. I didn't ask for support. And now I'm asking for support. And I think it was that where I was giving myself that grace, because there was a long period of time where that wasn't a priority. I wasn't loading anybody's dishwashers. I was loading my pipe.
Right.
That was about it.
Right. Asking for help is something that I've had to learn how to do.
Mhm.
And I think I may have shared this story before about how I was working at a site not too far from here, and I was working on I had to do this insurance renewal for a patient. And I remember I took it on by myself, and part of that was ego. Part of it was, I just wanted to do a great job and look how impressive I am. I did this thing by myself. And when I started working on it, I remember the thinking, so what ended up happening is I start doing this thing and I start to get kind of overwhelmed because I'm like, wow, this is like a beast, that whatever this thing was. And then I spoke with my clinical supervisor. My clinical supervisor asked me, she goes, Anthony, why are you doing this by yourself? Why didn't you ask me for help? And it didn't occur. What it was is that I didn't want to ask for help because I wanted to show that I could do this thing on my own, take on this, but it wasn't that the task wasn't designed for a person to do it on their own. You need to work with an entire team to get these pieces together. And part of that, referring back to the body, part of that is the high in the past that I've gotten from being praised for oh, look at how much you can do, or look at how hardworking Anthony is. And I think the making amends to my body around that has been, acknowledging on one end that okay, this was something that I used to do. This is one way that I used to kind of what do I want to say here? I don't know, get that confidence boost that I wasn't getting elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't have to behave that way anymore.
Absolutely.
I can get self-esteem from other things that don't require me you're stupid. I can get self-esteem.
I want you to see my mouth is closed.
Yeah. I can get self-esteem from engaging in esteemable acts, and esteemable acts are not ones that are driven by my ego, but are driven by the spirit of service.
Absolutely.
Mind body connection. Do you have a recent connection to that idea? Mind body.
Mind body. I'm not sure.
Well, we've talked about anxiety before.
Oh yeah. You know what? Since and I've talked about this on here about coming to terms with my people pleasing and my maybe Al-Anon issues. I haven't been anxious like I had before that. It's almost as if like that one piece of the puzzle I was finally acknowledging.
The one piece was the part that was making you anxious.
Yeah, I don't know because I find myself like I would talk about like remember being in the theater, sitting down, and having these anxiety attacks or these anxiety attacks pop up in some of the most inopportune places and not understanding what is it, what happened, and um, I have not had that. Knock on wood. No, because I mean I'm grateful because I think the worst thing, and you know, if you had anxiety or panic attacks, I think for me the worst part about it is not actually the actual attack, but it's the muscle kind of memory, the kind of knowing what it felt like, and when I find myself in situations that I've been in before where it's can't come up, expecting it. And so it's like in some ways I've kind of like brought it on because I was expecting it. And I'm like, no, you know what?
You know what I've had to do recently is, and this is something I've struggled with throughout my life, has been the fact that I'm on medication.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I'm on an SSRI. Sorry, I keep kicking the camera. I'm on an SSRI and I'm on a anti-anxiety, but it's off-label for anxiety, so it's gabapentin. I'm on Trintellix and gabapentin, and since I was young, like I've always thought to myself, like I don't want to be on medication. So when I was younger, I never took them as prescribed. Like I would take them for a little bit and then I would stop taking them because I'm like, oh, I'm better now. And I did this, you know, all throughout my teens. I did this all throughout my 20s. I did this less so in my 30s. I'm in my 30s now, like less so in my early 30s. And, you know, then I got my shit together in like the last few years. And the thing that I've had to accept, and going back to like the idea of making amends to my body, is that I like really hurt myself throughout all that time. Like I was making my life so much more difficult without realizing it by being like really erratic or like being really inconsistent about the way I was taking my medication. And I think within the last 5+ years, I've come to terms with the fact that, like, you know what, this is just what it looks like off my meds, it's like being in my body can sometimes feel unbearable.
Yeah.
You know, and the amends that I've made to myself is one, accepting that like I guess I had to have the experiences that I did in order for me to like actually come to terms with the fact that, like, you know what, this is just something that I need in order to feel okay.
Yeah, exactly. I think that this idea of like making amends to me, you know, I think I lost my thought, but it's
It's okay. The other part
Yeah,
of what
fill
I,
that.
yeah. The other part of, and just jump in if any, but the other part of that amends is, you know, the thing that the thread in all of this for me is in seeing how hard I've been on myself, or like, and how hard I can be on myself, and how some of that feels so subtle. Like I can't, when I think back at times when I've been really hard on myself, as recent as like yesterday or this morning, you like, I sometimes don't know that I'm doing it.
Yeah.
You know, like sometimes it's just like a default setting, or, you know, and part of my frustration with that sometimes is like in those moments, like it being very hard to like stop it,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, to like be more loving and caring to myself.
I think that okay, so I feel like for those of us who do 12-step, and 12-step is not the only way, but I can only speak to what I know. My first it's this idea of spiritual awakenings, and this first set of spiritual awakenings came uh in the 4-step, and especially when I started to acknowledge that I had a part in everything. Because what I would start to accept, or what I started to accept, is that like and there was a period, and I know this is higher power too, where I was really trying to be mindful about the language that I was using around the things. Like instead of saying good or bad, I was just saying higher or lower. And I realized that some of my choices were not my highest choices. and some were lower, but they all were my choices. And to me, that was empowering in that way. And that it was that beginning that got me to a really good place, like, or got me ready to be open to the stuff that was coming to me from folks who cared, who were looking out for me, like a sponsor, close friends, things like that. I was starting to hear things. I was actually starting to tap into the foundation that my parents had laid before me that I wasn't even paying attention to because I was in my own world. I was my free will had run rampant,
Yeah.
as they will.
What were the things that your parents, like, what was part of, maybe one thing that was part of the foundation that your parents laid down for you?
Well, hard work,
Okay.
integrity,
Yeah.
just being honest about, like, the messaging that I saw is like there was no need. It was the honesty, the integrity, and loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
There were all of those things, and they were there. They just were kind of masked because, like, I realized, and this is a sign that I know that I've always been, in some way, that light was still there. It just wasn't burning as bright as it could. And I have a lot of friends, or a lot of people that I befriended during that time, during my darker times, that I have reconnected with, and we're good friends. And so what that means to me is that I saw something in their spirit.
Right.
Like, crystal meth ain't no joke. And I found myself in a lot of dark places. And what I recognized that I did throughout that, it was, if I saw darkness coming, if I felt uncomfortable or whatever, I, at most of the time, not all the time, I backed away. I protected myself in that instance. So I feel like the stuff was there. It's just I didn't reach my full capacity with my understanding of it. Like, now I sound like my parents.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
You know, I had a lot of unrealistic expectations for what it meant to be a human being, like, and to be less abstract. By that I mean, like, there was a time where, like, I would feel like if I wasn't ecstatic or happy all the time, that I would, like, that felt like it was wrong. And so, on top of maybe having like an off day or not, and I don't even know if it's just an off day, but on top of not feeling well, then there was like the judgment that I had toward myself for not feeling well. Like, why isn't it that, like, it was like I would get upset with myself for being depressed, or I would get upset with myself for being anxious. And I think a lot of the being upset was because I had unrealistic expectations. Like, one of the things that I've come to terms with is that, like, no one can, at least as far as I know, no one can be happy, quote unquote, 100% of the time. And, like, what is it that we're calling happiness anyway? Like, I don't know. There's like the difference between maybe being happy and being content. I think the other thing is that I think about, like, what it means to be a sober person for me with respect to my body. And part of that is like acceptance, right? Like,
Yeah.
acceptance of, okay, like, maybe I'm not having a good day today, or, maybe I am, yeah, like, someone cut me off, or just any number of things, like, just kind of being gentle with myself in those moments.
Exactly.
Which I think has been, the living amends that I've had for my body, to my body. Yeah. I really like what you said about honesty. I think that's a big one for me too these days, about like what is honestly going on in my body. I was telling Brandon, actually, before we started filming today, how I'm doing a 10th step. Well, I'm on the 10th step in SLAW, and how I had this experience between yesterday and today where I was reviewing my 10th step from the day prior, and I could see this like hard shift in my behavior, and how, like, doing the 10 step, I was able to actually see something and then change it. And that was, I was like, oh shit, like the 12 steps actually work.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Which I thought was,
That honesty piece, um, I think the challenge was not just being honest to other people, but honest with myself, like about how I'm feeling about something, and not letting shame or guilt keep me from like. It used to blow me away when I was able to talk to people about feelings of jealousy, feeling of it being envious, because when early recovery, it's like you have folks who, for some reason, seem like the world just lands in their lap, which is was just my perception because I was still mentally sick, and I wasn't seeing that things just are. I mean, we all have our privileges, but yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think I've I have certainly have said this before, where one of the like a Buddhist idea here is that the biggest illusion is this idea that we're somehow different,
Yeah.
and I think that's part of I don't have a social media presence. I have a LinkedIn. That's because what I'm told is that I need to as a professional, and then I have the Instagram for the podcast. But I don't browse these things.
Oh yeah.
And I bring that up to say that with like social media, for example, it was too easy for me to form entire narratives in my brain about over two-dimensional
Exactly.
images,
And it's crazy with social media.
Mhm.
I I bel early recovery, I was working a swing shift. And so I had to do all my meetings early. I really couldn't participate in recovery the way I had been and when I didn't have to work. And so I would watch everything on Facebook, and I would be deep in FOMO because I was watching what I thought was people living, and in my mind I'm all thinking they're having fun because I'm not there. The truth of it is I can curate what I want you to see. I can be a complete mess and just take pictures and show you me smiling and everything, and that doesn't tell the whole story.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. 100%. And I think, well, going back to this idea of social media, I think whenever I'm looking at the world and I'm extrapolating from the things that I see, and then from that extrapolation, then forming opinions about myself, that already feels like too much,
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, I've been talking a lot about the observer. Well, maybe not a lot, but the idea of the observer. So if you're not familiar with the idea of the observer, so there's this idea, for example, that we are not our feelings. Yeah, we are not our feelings. We are not our thoughts. We are the observer of those things, right? So if you're hearing me, who's hearing me? Anyway, so it's like a philosophical idea, but the point is that um I am the person who gives a narrative to the feelings or thoughts, right? Like I am the person who judges. I am the person reacting to the world. And of course, we can have a nuanced conversation. We can say, well, like what about being a human or what about being myself informs why I have certain reactions? Like, sure, we can have that conversation. But the other conversation we can have is one that is about taking a step back from our reactions to like how we think and how we feel and just observing those things, literally just observing without judgment. And I think that's something that like I've had to learn how to do over time. And the point of all of that is that nothing is fixed. Not what I see in a picture, nothing is fixed. One of the things I remind myself of is like everyone has to take a shit, everyone gets sick, everyone has to go to sleep, everyone has to age, like literally there are these fundamental things, and that the differences that I think I see are, I mean, that's again, as usual, like a much larger conversation, but the differences I see are immaterial. They're not.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I'm trying to say?
No, I
here?
got you. I
Yeah.
got you completely. I like the idea that nothing is fixed. It's like, yeah.
Like someone was telling me recently, they're like, yeah, I just broke up. Someone was telling me that they had broken up with their partner, and they were saying, yeah, all those pictures of us online, they're like inaccurate. And I'm like, girl, that you're not telling me anything that like I haven't heard before. You know what I mean? It's like this idea that like everything we like, everyone smiles and, you know, and people form opinions about what that means. And no, we don't know what people's lives look like behind closed doors.
Exactly.
You know, as I've heard it like said in the rooms, like to compare is to despair.
Yeah, exactly. I think going back to the social media, it's like I remember like in the beginning when we started talking about this, it's like obviously I like I had my judgments like, why aren't you doing this? Why are you doing this? You know, but I understand completely. But where I've been since I've been doing the podcast is I've been modifying how I participate in my social media, especially Facebook. I started like it's always been like for me important to just friend folks that I know in real life, in real time. Uh, I would get a lot of requests or whatever from folks that I just had no connection with. And then also the thing that I do is like, if I don't want to wish you a happy birthday, that's probably a sign that we're not that tight. But I have gone through because they have this thing where you could like other things, you could like pages from celebrities and whatever. And I have been going through and slowly but surely and getting rid of anything that is not like if I don't know, I don't need to know anybody's life beyond. I've it's almost as if you know how you like to look at kittens and things like that.
I do.
I get to decide because
Yeah.
I get to decide completely how I'm going to view. Like obviously there are some things that I definitely want to see. And so I try to make sure that if I'm going to spend any time on there, that I'm spending time doing that. But I've also in real time while I'm doing that, I have been completely trying to change the landscape of what I see because it can do a number on you. It's like I was saying before, like watching and believing that folks are having this great time and that I wasn't a part of, and which is absolute nonsense.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I've learned about myself. So the what I wanted to say, like as you were talking, was I honest to God do not, maybe understand isn't the right word, but what is hard for me to stomach is how people are on social media. Like I honest to God, like the phrase that I want to say, but I think is inaccurate is like, I don't know how people do it. Like I really, so that's the phrase I want to say, but I you know, I can, you know, like I can theorize and I can give you ideas about why people are able to engage in like social media. I honest to God, like it is so draining for me. Like I cannot browse social media. I don't like social media because it makes me really uncomfortable. But like also similarly, like similar to that is I also don't I generally don't like songs with lyrics, or I don't like I'm speaking in kind of definitive terms, but what I'm trying to say is like I do not like things that are emotionally evocative or are trying to get me to feel or think a certain way, unless I've like consented to that thing, you know. And I've just
That's like a lot of stuff, huh?
yeah, there's so many. I mean, like
Yeah, because that's like that's do you watch regular TV?
no,
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. No, that's like a lot of stuff because even in posters and stuff around us, like it's everywhere.
yeah, little. I mean, that's
Yeah.
everything is because well, with capitalism, when you're thinking about marketing, like everything that a person watches or consumes is trying to get you to think or feel a certain way because there's an action that's intended, right? Like with advertisements, the action, the draw there is spend money on this thing,
Yeah.
right? It's literally anything where like you are viewing it, there's an intention there. There's like something that's grasping for you. And I have a very hard time with that.
Yeah.
You know,
On the flip side of that, I mean, like we were pretty like our advertising for this podcast is pretty mild, but it's like, do you ever feel conflicted in ways?
I'm not on the marketing team.
No.
Yeah, like,
yeah, you're on the marketing team.
Yeah, I'm not on the which is interesting because I actually have like a background in strategy. you know, and strategy is all about like using research to appeal to certain markets. And but I use my powers for good. I haven't done that kind of work in a while. But you know, the point is here is that I've made peace with that. You know, like I've made peace with the fact that like, you know what, I'm sensitive to these kind of things and I don't want to consume them. And I do curate the things that I do consume. You know, like I will watch like videos about like kittens or like, you know, animals doing funny shit or comic strips or like the other thing is I watch a lot of stand up.
Yeah.
You know, I watch a lot of stand up and I'm also like a creature of habit. So like once I find something that I watch that I like, I'll watch it over and over and over again.
But that's how I am with authors. When I read a book, it's like if I fall in love with like I love like their style. Like,
yeah.
And I'm
yes. I had a childhood author that I really liked that I did that with. Like it was like this is a tangent.
Tangents are good.
Yeah. So like the tangent here is that I didn't know that writing could be this way. So it was the guy's name is Chuck Palahniuk. He's the guy who wrote Fight Club and Lullaby and Invisible Monsters. And I remember the first time I picked up one of his books and I as I was reading, I was like, holy shit, like I didn't know that someone could write this way. Like I didn't know that someone could it's hard to describe. The other book that did that for me is this book. It's this I think it's an autobiography. It's called The Chronology of Water. And it's this beautiful, I think it's a memoir. It's called The Chronology of Water. It's about this. She was an Olympic hopeful who basically like lost everything because of heroin.
Yeah.
But she's like, you know, a beautiful writer. And the point I'm getting to here is that like, I didn't know that people could write this way or that it could feel this way. And that changed everything for me.
Oh yeah. It's a game changer.
Yeah, because then you're like, oh, I want more of this, whatever
Absolutely.
this is. Yeah.
So I think that's a wonderful amends. I think that's a wonderful amends. Like knowing what you like, knowing what makes you uncomfortable, knowing what causes you to be anxious, and taking action. And that action is, you know, steering clear of it or finding a way to have it but have it on your own terms.
Yeah. The last thing I want to say is, damn it. You were saying making amends to your body. Oh gosh. Oh, making amends to your body, man, that's gonna bother me. I can't remember now. But it was kind of like it was like one of these things that like you hear in the rooms a lot. All right, well, I lost it.
Aww.
So it's around that time.
Yeah.